Mario Kart. It's the premier kart racing game, and it has been since before I was born back in 1992. I got my start with Mario Kart 64 personally, on the Nintendo 64 of course. While some have had their issue with the more recent Switch 2 Mario Kart game, Mario Kart World Tour, the previous Mario Kart 8, is one of the best-selling games ever and most beloved Mario Karts. This has made it a tough, near impossible kart racer to, well, compete with, though competitors have come and mostly gone trying. Recently, there has been some movement there though, pun intended, with Sonic and Kirby being able to strike with some modicum level of successes in 2025. But what if I told you there was an even bigger competitor, though one that never quite found footing in the Western market, led by the Korean game development and publishing OG giant Nexon, and developed by Nitro Studios, a studio specifically created for the new game. What started in the early 2000s from a digital arcade full of craziness would become one of the biggest kart racers in all of Asia. KartRider. KartRider was originally developed by Ludemon Studio, who would later be gobbled up by Nexon proper, and would reach a whopping 380 million registered users worldwide, with over half of the KR population having played the game and just under half for Taiwan having enjoyed the game before too. KartRider was a staple in Asia, especially the two aforementioned countries, one being the home market of course, though it never managed to find much success in the West. A classic story element in the Death of a Game series, a series where we investigate the largest contributing factors to a game or company's death, by utilizing a timeline of events filled with clues, developer testimonies, and most important of all, detective intuition. This all culminates in a final deduction, where we crack the case for good. KartRider might not have had much of a footprint in the West, but Nexon was looking to change that, with their long-awaited sequel, KartRider Drift, the star of this show, largely. After launching first on PC, January 12, 2023, and then on console, March 8, 2023, KartRider Drift, despite clearly having quite the budget and marketing push, even featuring K-pop music talents like Blackpink, would fail to catch flight on both PC and mobile, ultimately being outpaced by an older, mobile-only version, KartRider Rush. With multiple games in the series being shut down as of 2026, especially in the West, this makes KartRider a prime set of games to cover. Yes, that's right. We will be covering the original KartRider a little bit too, riding into the birth of the newer, recently Shudder title KartRider Drift, the main star of course. And so detectives, how did one of Mario Kart's biggest Korean competitors fail to make their mark in the West? I would like to welcome this video's sponsor, Monly. Monly is a language learning platform that utilizes a freemium model and combines traditional lessons with innovative technology like VR and AR to teach a variety of languages. There's no better time than now to try out Monly too, because they are currently hosting a spring sale that allows you to get up to 70% off of premium access to 41 languages and, well, starting today if you use my link in the description. With access to 41 languages and 33 native languages, Monly can combine for a whopping total 1,320 languages combined, with real conversations with Monly chatbot that can provide you with real-time feedback too. But don't take my word for it, it's been downloaded 125 million times and is a top 5 language learning app worldwide. Make sure to check out the link in the description or on screen so you can gain access to the huge springtime sale I mentioned that's up to 70% off of your access to Monly. Thank you for sponsoring this video, Monly, and thank you for the support, detectives. Back to the case. The story begins with another game creating quite the unlikely beginnings. Crazy beginnings, one might say. Crazy Arcade would debut back in 2001, and with it, mini-game modes that provided a variety of content for free. One of these game modes was none other than the Crazy Racing KartRider game, which would launch in the summer of 2004, developed by a little-known Ludemon Studio and published by Nexon in South Korea, Tian City in China, and Gamania in Taiwan. KartRider would generate hundreds of millions in revenue, becoming a staple on PC in Korea over the course of many years. The Chinese version of KartRider would drop in 2006, dubbed Pop Kart, and would later launch in Russia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand as well. This would lead to their further expansion abroad in Asia, and further successes especially in China, and Taiwan in particular. KartRider's success was due in part to the fact that the game was essentially the only playable kart racer on PC, proxy competition with Mario Kart, and the fact that it was supported by a Korean audience, which is a very fiercely loyal gaming audience, and well, the customization. Like how you could wrap your car with dozens of layers of decals and also purchase certain karts, including even BMW partnered karts. This would likely lead to a desire to penetrate the Western market too, a market Nexon had recently been heavily investing in, erecting their own branch there, Nexon America, founded back in 2005. Nexon wanted to make money in a new market, and they were convinced that KartRider could be one of the premier titles on that front. An NA version went into testing sometime in 2007 before weirdly disappearing altogether, including removing any mentions of it on the website. KartRider had little footprint in the West, managing to skate by virtually quietly in the early 2010s. Wanting to go further than just a perfunctory basis, Nexon would drop the actual KartRider on the Apple Store in March of 2011, as well as a new game on Facebook dubbed KartRider Dash. KartRider mobile and Facebook versions would shut down a few years later, effectively ending KartRider's footprint in the Western market yet again. And it would remain that way for a number of years to come, until coming as a surprise to the few fans left in the West who were still playing the Eastern version to get a fix, was when KartRider Drift would be announced November 2019. KartRider Drift would come out swinging in their announcement trailer. It would showcase their brand new, revitalized, and new modern crafted visuals. Biggest kicker of all, the game being playable on both PC and mobile devices at launch, with a later console launch to boot. Drift felt like the first major global attempt from KartRider, and it seemed like a serious attempt too. KartRider Drift would enter closed beta December 6, 2019, and the early impressions were largely positive. The game didn't seem to feature the same issues that the previous Western iteration had, which was the ability to purchase carts that differed in power level, which many players felt was pay to win, as it is, literally. Instead, they had a currency in-game you could earn these carts with, or the Racing Pass, which was effectively a battle pass that would allow you to unlock some carts. KartRider Drift felt like a callback to the previous KartRider because of how competitive they managed to keep the controls for the game, though it missed a certain amount of the game's charm and closer-up focused visual scheme in my opinion. Graphics were certainly prettier and flashier here, but a notch below Mario Kart, and had none of the personalities in my opinion. The reason that this was significant to me was that the competition between KartRider and Mario Kart was inevitable, as KartRider was the KR answer, in a sense. The differences of the two series, however, besides customization in the favor of KartRider, actually, was the fact that KartRider was a lot more about precise drifting. This made an appearance in KartRider Drift, as well, with landing drift, auto-quick boosting, S-charging, and even double drifting, making it easily the most competitive kart racer on the market, though there was a question about how important that even was. But in the midst of KartRider Drift's hype cycle and development, another mobile game in the KartRider universe would be erected suddenly. Shockingly, KartRider Rush. It would release on mobile devices only, and if you're confused, well, that makes two of us. To put simply, KartRider Rush was an even more mobile-centric modern KartRider title, with simplified driving mechanics, and for the first time in the series, featured a fully voiced story mode, so it was way more casually appealing as it featured auto-accelerate as a base feature too. Rush just had more meat on the bones than what we had yet experienced with Drift, which was a bit confusing considering it came out before. My guess is that they realized that making a game playable on PC and mobile devices isn't the same as making a PC-worthy racing game, or a game in general, as the bar on mobile is just much lower, let's be honest. That's what makes games like Genshin Impact more impressive, as it's playable on both PC and mobile at a high graphical fidelity. Not to mention they had to put way more money into the PC title to attract an audience that was certainly there but untapped, as remember, kart racers largely hadn't been available on PC. That meant that they would have to grow the market there themselves, which was not going to be easy, and compared to leveraging what they already had experience with on mobile, with the markets in, more recent times, they were already familiar with, and receiving far more financial incentive to go that direction. Never seen something like this before, but KartRider Drift and Rush would exist in this weird sort of parallel, until eventually one would continue to grow at an alarming rate and the other would perish. The open beta would begin September 2022 and would introduce KartRider to the public for the first time. The new cinematic trailer featuring KartRider was showcasing the game's early 2000 roots, and how much they had grown and changed with their new title too. But just before the supposed 2023 launch of KartRider Drift, there were rumblings and protests in Korea proper, where people were enraged because not only was the new launch announced, alongside it was a bitter pill to swallow, as Nexon had promised to shut down the remaining KR server for KartRider OG, which many KR fans felt like was a slap in the face, and a forceful move to get players to move to the new game, KartRider Drift. We have seen this happen before, and, massively backfire, let's be honest. We saw this with Asheron's Call and its sequel, which did irreparable damage to an MMORPG that should be included in the same conversations as World of Warcraft, Ultima Online, and Star Wars Galaxies, but oftentimes isn't. It's also distinctly not a Korean choice, which is interesting, as their market almost never shutters a prior title while working on a new one, something that I wish the Western market would learn from. These would be troubling developments, as typically, Korean publishers and developers like Nexon don't chase profit in other markets that hard, especially if their own market profit isn't that good. This means if KartRider Drift didn't do well, it could face the curtains faster than normal. KartRider Drift would pull out all of the stops and launch in a major marketing way January 12, 2023. KartRider had the perfect blend of marketing, with tons of flashy stuff, developer behind-the-scenes goodies, and plenty of gameplay and tips showcasing what the game was about. But there was certainly a question about all of that, even before launch. Could they actually manage to penetrate the Western market just by brute force? While I normally like to name drop some Metacritic reviews, they barely have any critical coverage of KartRider Drift there. Instead, we can jump into the Steam launch where, out of 2,400 players, 71% enjoyed the game at a mostly positive score. While the reviews were largely positive, such as the game feeling like a PC-playable, modern Mario Kart, being free to play and offering a ton of fun, what was in the game was limited, as it would lack in content, including features expected in a kart racer game, including even from their first game. And for a largely multiplayer-focused title, as it lacked a story mode and many single-player AI modes, it had latency issues that would match players from completely different regions across the world against each other, which would lead to very unbalanced and glitchy matches. An issue KartRider Drift suffered from early on too was how boosting functioned. At the base speed, the game was really slow. Think 50cc in Mario Kart. And in order to go fast, you have to complete these big drift sequences. Think Mario Kart World, which is ironically not very well received because of this as well. If you look at how future similar kart racers would handle it, like Sonic Cross Worlds or Kirby Air Riders, they would have similar multi-sequences to increase speed but offer faster base speeds on average and just make the whole sequences faster to boot. These games would come out about 2 years later though, so maybe they had some time to cook and observe KartRider. But really, the biggest criticism about KartRider Drift was staring at us the entire time. Rush came out and was doing massive numbers, 10 million downloads in just 2 weeks. The biggest criticism about Drift was that the fact that it looked like a mobile game on PC, and with every bit of negative assumption that came with that. Rush just looked like a mobile game, since that's all that it was. Nexon wanting Nitro Studio to be competitive with KartRider Drift on PC or even in the kart racing competition made sense, right? But if they wanted to have a goal like that, they had to fully commit there. Now they were stuck with this very expensive just check out the serious marketing plan the game had. It included the likes of Blackpink, K-pop legends, and all you have behind that marketing is a hollow kart racing experience that was getting outpaced by its older but less loved brother. KartRider OG would be shut down in Korea and Taiwan just weeks after the launch of Drift, and then would only remain in China, which is interesting, but considering it's handled by different publishers there and was probably still seeing success, that would likely contribute to why it, would remain. The population on Steam probably wasn't good enough though, at just 4,700 players peak, but maybe they can do some of the other heavy lifting with their mobile and console launches, though on mobile they will be competing with their other stablemate, Rush. KartRider Drift would formulate their content plan over a seasonal schedule, happening on month or 2 month sprints, adding with it 4 new characters, 8 new tracks, 2 new game modes, factory runs, and the Grand Prix mode. This was a classic live service type scheduling, but bizarre when you consider that this was a kart racer, and kart racers typically weren't updated like this. I mean, if you look at Mario Kart 8, which dropped in 2018, it's had around 22 updates since, for example, and it's the best-selling Mario Kart game of all time at over 79 million copies sold. This was a classic live service type scheduling, but bizarre when you consider how kart racers were typically updated, which was actually seldomly. And these updates that I'm talking about aren't even content specific. Mind you, the game does have previous updates from content in the deluxe edition, but I guess the point that I'm making is that if you're launching a kart racer and it's not already feature complete, the chances of you having success in competing with Mario Kart, it just hasn't really existed yet. Not to say that it isn't possible, but nobody's done it yet, and maybe there's a good reason for that. The population would struggle to eclipse 1,000 players peak after the update, and there's another issue with the update schedule too. Season 2 would drop May 11th, 2023. Not far later, it would introduce the World Kart Championships, and alongside it, the new theme to accompany the game. Some new tracks were also introduced, but more importantly, other tracks had their L3 licenses removed, which was creating a problem in the game. That's because license races were needed to unlock higher level content, and to be honest, other games have done this too, like Sonic Crossworlds. So it's not that strange. The problem is that these games have pre-existing racetracks and stuff like that, and very strong racetracks, and people just have bigger expectations for what maps they're gonna race on, even in a game like KartRider Drift. Some players were getting bad impressions because they were playing the game and not encountering the more challenging maps, making the game seem even more boring and less competitive than it actually was. But with the PC population peaking at just 581 players at this point, it's hard to imagine this update making much of a big difference now. Season 3 would drop July 13th, 2023. It would introduce a new ranked season, flag mode, and a more World Tour themed visual scheme. But it's around this time you can read reports from the player base that the game felt like it was filled with mostly bots. And you can see why, as the population in July was just barely at 434 players peak. Each race in KartRider Drift is just 8 racers. So if you do the math, that would only be 54 races running at one time without bots. And this is where I feel that the lead is increasingly lost for KartRider Drift. It's getting annihilated on content by Rush, which already had like 20 seasons. Even though it was effectively the only real kart racer you could play on PC these days too. Nobody was willing to play it still, which showed there was a problem with the game. Besides the whole associated with Nexon thing, which certainly was a negative cloud, you see, KartRider Drift looked just too generic to be competitive on PC, when not a single kart racer beside it looks generic. They almost all feature seriously popular gaming IPs and characters. It had no identity, no matter how much money they continued to pour into it and its marketing. Season 4 and 5 would come in September, and then November 2023. Season 4 would introduce the crossover mode lab, and Season 5 the infinite boost mode, being re-added to the map cycle. Duo mode would be bizarrely removed, and only 194 players at peak left were playing KartRider in November 2023. The 6th and final season for KartRider Drift would drop February 15th, 2024, and it was more than just a seasonal update. It was a major update titled Rise, and alongside it came some major challenges to balancing and how the game's mechanics would function, as well as a new game director, Jae-woo Song. The update would add chat functionality for the first time, finally, giving players the ability to talk and text chat, whereas previously the game only allowed for communication via voice, and, well, some learned that the hard way. They also added character skills and the ability to custom tune your own kart, which the first game had too, though this wouldn't apply to the speed mode, which was like the more competitive racing mode. The character skills were added alongside the ability to tune your kart to add more racing diversity, and ability to develop a more unique playstyle. But with the Rise update as well, despite how poor the game's reception had been up to this point, would add even more monetization into the game. And it would even add a heavier reward focus on the Racing Pass or the game's Battle Pass, while also introducing Racing Boxes, which were effectively loot boxes. It was like a few steps forward with a major step backward, with some players even likening it to the Awakening update that killed Dauntless. We have no idea really the reception of KartRider Drift on Xbox because they never talk about it, but coming as a shock to the player base, and those outside of it even, was the announcement of a shutdown there, August 14th, 2024. This was a shutdown in under just 2 years. KartRider Drift wasn't working on console, PC, and perhaps soon enough, not even on mobile. KartRider Drift would shut down on all platforms in the West, announced February 26th, 2025, the day before the shutdown. They also would shut down the majority of the remaining international servers, leaving only the Taiwan and Korea servers left, which historically had been very big markets for KartRider. The big push to the West for Nexon had been an utter failure for the KartRider IP, and I can't help but feel like this is one of those rare instances where the game was over-marketed. When you spend millions on marketing, you have to recoup that at some point, and KartRider effectively had no footprint in the West. And while that might seem like the moment you have to start to market that much, and sure it is in a way, but you also have to build a loyal fanbase or core fanbase too. You can't do that artificially by just pumping in tons of money. You have to let the game grow, or compete on the merit in which you could. Meaning if you want to come out swinging with a feature set and content backlog like Mario Kart, or offer something majorly unique to them. If that sounds really difficult, well, that's the market. If you're trying to reach a new market by competing with the market's biggest competitor, you have to actually come to plate to compete. You can't just pump a bunch of money and hope to feed off of the runoff in a slightly lazy effort from a development perspective. The seasonal updates were adding content, sure, but also adding features the game probably should have had whenever it came out, to be fair. But things wouldn't look completely grim for the KartRider franchise just yet, as in the summer of 2025, Nitro Studio would announce a new KartRider title, this time a classic title. as the Nitro Studio director would state that this was needed because of the dissatisfaction of the previous KartRider fanbase, which was in the millions of players, by the way. This trend is exceedingly popular in Korea too. Remixing an old game and launching it again has made many Korean developers hundreds of millions, so perhaps the move to Classic works out for KartRider better than Drift did, though Rush was still relatively successful too. Nitro Studio would also apologize to the player base for the failure of KartRider Drift, something you couldn't ever catch Western developers doing these days. Sigh. But even as the promises gave KartRider fans hope, Nexon in the fall of 2025 would fire most of Nitro Studios' staff. In 2024, according to the article, Nexon had purchased Nitro Studio altogether, and now was offering voluntary resignations that came with a severance package, while transferring the remaining developers to Nexon Korea, leaving what would be a skeleton crew remaining left working on the game. A few months later, the only remaining servers, the Korean and Taiwan servers, would be shut down October 16th, 2025. But even the skeletons still remaining on the project would expire as well, as Nitro Studio would file for bankruptcy October 21st, 2025, laying off the entirety of the rest of the staff in the process. According to reports, Nitro Studio was shuttered because they had been in the red to the tune of 71 million USD. And to be honest, it's hard not to see why. They weren't the original developers behind KartRider, who likely still worked at Nexon proper, let's be honest. And yet, they were this super new expensive team made to handle the new franchise. Their marketing was expensive. Their development studio looked expensive. It was one of those all-star resource allocations, and they were really given the room to succeed, both financially and in terms of how long they were able to work on the game. It just didn't work out for KartRider Drift. But more than that, it didn't work out for Nitro Studio, because their game didn't work, and that was the only game they had. If you're wondering what would happen to KartRider Classic, it would be transferred ultimately to Nexon to handle development now. KartRider Drift was just too expensive, and not competitive for what value offering and fun it offered the player base even as a free game. The music's playing, detectives, and we've reached the end of this mystery. KartRider Drift is shut down, and if you were paying attention along the way, you'll likely have clues as to why. And so, why did KartRider Drift find itself in the death of the game series? Executive decision making. It was overly marketed. It had a lack of a strong feature list. Eventually plagued by loot boxes and the legacy of Nexon. It was live service. And so, that's the case, detectives. And sadly, KartRider Drift, unlike its predecessor, won't likely be remembered much past a fleeting thought. Well, if that's sad depending on your viewpoint, as is the fate of many other live service games without much soul to them. But KartRider Classic is still yet to come, and perhaps that can be a new home for the PC and mobile kart racer gamers that have called the game home before. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments below your thoughts on KartRider Drift, if you had the chance to play it, and any reasons you think I missed for why it was ultimately shut down. Until the next case.
Delta Squad